Right now, the Great Salt Lake sits at 4,192 feet above sea level. That is 3.8 feet from the lowest it has ever been, 5.7 feet below what scientists call the minimum healthy level. And 1,100 square miles of toxic lakebed are exposed to the wind, sending heavy metals into the lungs of 2.6 million people. Utah's snowpack just hit a record low. The lake's only lifeline this spring is already gone, and the 2034 Olympics are 8 years away. The numbers coming out of March 2026 are bad. Utah's statewide snowpack peaked at just 8.4 inches of snowwater content. That is half the normal peak, and the lowest on record. It peaked 3 weeks earlier than usual. Snowmelt was already outpacing new buildup before spring had officially started. The reason was not a lack of storms. Rain and snow across Utah ran at 98% of the average. The problem was temperature. The winter of 2025 to 2026 was the warmest in Utah's recorded history, by more than 2 degrees Fahrenheit statewide. Salt Lake City beat its previous winter temperature record by over 7 degrees. Storms that would have built snowpack fell as rain instead. 29 of 140 mountain monitoring stations hit all-time record lows for snow water content. 6 major river basins posted their worst readings ever. Jordan Clayton, the director of Utah's Snow Survey, warned that at the low end of forecasts, there may be basically no more lake level rise from here forward this spring. The projected inflow to the Great Salt Lake Basin at the safe estimate is 260,000 acre-feet. That is 36% of average. Forecasters noted there are no good pass matches for this winter. Even the models may be too hopeful. Bonnie Baxter, director of the Great Salt Lake Institute at Westminster University, called the situation terrifying. 3.8 feet is all that separates the lake from a new all-time record. Samantha Hawkins of the advocacy group Grow the Flow stated that the lake is on track to see a record low by this coming fall. 98% of Utah is in some form of drought. Salt Lake City issued a Stage 2 drought advisory on March 20th and asked residents to cut 10 million gallons per day on their own. And this is where the picture gets truly hard to read. Because a dropping lake level is not just a number on a gauge. It means more dry lakebed. And that lakebed is poisonous. Kevin Perry is a weather and air scientist at the University of Utah. His colleagues call him the King of the Playa, and that title is earned. Perry has spent years biking across the exposed lakebed on a fat tire bicycle, covering over 750 miles of ground that used to be underwater. He collects soil samples from the cracked, sun-baked surface. And every single sample he has tested contains arsenic levels more than 10 times higher than EPA. Safety limits for homes and workplaces. The soil also carries lead, mercury, cadmium, copper, and lithium, coming from both natural rock and over a century of mining runoff, especially from the Kennecott copper mine south of Salt Lake City. When the wind picks up across that 1,100 square miles of exposed lakebed, those heavy metals go airborne. And this is not a future risk. It is already happening. On April 27, 2025, a toxic dust storm swept across the entire Salt Lake Valley, hitting the most densely populated areas in the state. Satellite images from January 2025 captured a dust plume rising off Farmington Bay and stretching south all the way to Utah County. Perry documented another major event at Farmington Bay in July 2025. A 2024 University of Utah study found that Great Salt Lake dust does more damage to living cells than dust from other major sources in the region. In plain terms, it is more harmful when breathed in. A separate study found that mercury levels in the lakebed soil have actually gone up in recent years, even as other metals have dropped from past highs. Right now, only about 9% of the exposed lakebed is actively sending dust into the air. That sounds low until you understand why. A natural salt crust covers most of the surface and holds the soil in place. But that crust breaks down over time. It cracks in the heat. Vehicles driving across the playa damage it. And once it is gone, the toxic soil underneath is open to the wind. 9% of 1,100 square miles is already causing dust storms visible from space. The question is, what happens when that number climbs? There is a reason this story keeps getting worse. The health effects have barely been studied. How is that possible? Utah Physicians for a Healthy Environment has called the shrinking lake a proven, clear health hazard. Sarah Graneski, a University of Utah researcher, led a 2024 study that found dust exposure hits Pacific Islander and Hispanic communities in Salt Lake County harder than anyone else. And yet, the state ran just 4 air quality monitors near the lake until September 2024. when it added 2 more. 6 monitors for 800 square miles of toxic dry lakebed next to a metro area of 1.2 million people. The legislature approved just $150,000 of a $651,000 request for more monitors. Perry's own research on dust control options delivered the number that should keep Utah lawmakers up at night. The cheapest cleanup plan would cost $3 billion over 50 years. The most expensive goes past $30 billion. His advice was simple. The best way to deal with the dust is to put water back in the lake. For comparison, look at what happened to Owens Lake in California. Los Angeles drained it in the 1920s to feed its growing water supply. By the 1980s, the dry lakebed had become the single worst source of fine particle pollution in the entire United States. Dust storms off, the exposed lakebed sent clouds of alkali and heavy metals across the Owens Valley. The city has spent $2.5 billion and counting on dust control, covering sections of the lakebed with shallow water, gravel blankets, and salt grass. And Owens Lake is 1/12 the size of the Great Salt Lake. Utah is staring at the same problem, 12 times bigger, right next to a city of 1.2 million people. But the dust is not even the full picture. Below the surface, an entire ecosystem is falling apart. Over 12 million birds of 339 species depend on the Great Salt Lake. It is the largest wetland system in the American West. Shorebirds flying from as far as South America depend on it as a key refueling stop. And the entire food chain rests on 2 organisms you have probably never thought about. The first is microbialites, underwater reef structures built by tiny living things that produce roughly 30% of the lake's food energy. When exposed to air, their living mats begin dying within weeks. Recovery takes years of being underwater again. At the 2022 record low, 54% of South Arm microbialites were exposed. If the lake drops below 4,189 feet, that number rises to 66%. Every microbialite community in the North Arm is already gone from too much salt. Microbialites feed brine flies, another link in the chain that rarely makes the news. In October 2022, ecologist David Herbst found almost no brine fly young on the reef surfaces where there should have been hundreds. John Luft of Utah's Division of Wildlife Resources said the brine fly food web was all but gone. When the base of the food chain disappears, everything above it starts to follow. The second is brine shrimp. 45% of the world's brine shrimp eggs come from the Great Salt Lake, harvested by 21 companies and shipped to 55 countries to feed farmed fish and shrimp around the world. Timothy Hawks, chairman of the Great Salt Lake Brine Shrimp Cooperative, has laid out the stakes plainly. If the Great Salt Lake goes away, it would drive up costs and limit the ability to produce food across the developing world. Thomas Bostiels, the cooperative's head, explained the cycle. As salt levels rise, tired brine shrimp produce fewer offspring, which means smaller harvests. When salt levels jumped to 185 grams per liter during the 2022 low, brine shrimp numbers crashed. The harvest dropped to 19 million pounds, barely half the 10-year average. Harvesters had to dig channels at a cost of millions of dollars per year just to reach the remaining water. But here is the detail that matters most. After the 2023 snowpack brought salt levels back down to 92 grams per liter, brine shrimp bounced back fast. The 2023 to 2024 harvest recovered to 29 million pounds, with 90% hatch rates. The ecosystem can recover. It proved it. It just needs water. And this year, the water is not coming. The most visible loss happened on Gunnison Island, one of North America's largest American white pelican breeding colonies. As the lake dropped, the island connected to the mainland. Coyotes and foxes reached the nesting birds. In 2023, pelicans completely abandoned the colony. They partly returned in 2024 with roughly 3,100 nests, but predators still have access. Across the broader lake, shorebird numbers have dropped 70% since the 1970s. And the ecological collapse is not just an environmental problem, it is an economic one. The brine shrimp industry alone generates between $30 million and $67 million a year, depending on the harvest. Those eggs feed an estimated 10 million metric tons of farmed seafood worldwide. The mineral companies pulling salt and potash from the lake contribute $1.3 billion annually to Utah's economy. Add in tourism, recreation, property values along the Wasatch Front, and the cost of healthcare from dust exposure, and researchers have estimated that a full lake collapse would hit Utah's economy by more than $1 billion every single year. A 2022 study by a group of scientists from Brigham Young University and the University of Utah warned that without emergency action, the economic damage would reach into the tens of billions. If you're finding this useful, subscribe. We cover stories like this every week with the full science and the data you need to actually follow what is happening. So, how did the largest saltwater lake in the Western Hemisphere end up 3.8 feet from its record low for the second time in 4 years? The 2022 record was not supposed to be repeated. A historic 2023 snowpack, the biggest in Utah's records, pushed the lake back up to 4,195 feet by June 2024. Officials celebrated. Headlines declared the recovery had begun. And then, summer evaporation, upstream water storage refilling, and a bone-dry second half of 2024 erased roughly half those gains. The 2025 water year ended at the third lowest level since tracking began in 1903. The brief recovery hid a deeper shortage that never went away. To understand the scale of what has been lost, go back to 1987. That year, the Great Salt Lake peaked at 4,211 feet. It covered roughly 3,300 square miles. Flooding was so bad that the state built massive pumps to push water into the western desert. That was less than 40 years ago. Since then, the lake has dropped 19 feet. It has lost more than half its surface area, and a railroad causeway built in 1959 split the lake into two arms with different salt levels, making the north arm so salty that almost nothing can survive in it. The decline sped up sharply between 2020 and 2022. That 3-year stretch was the worst drought the American West had seen in 1,200 years. The lake lost an average of 1.2 million acre-feet per year during that window. Northern Utah has warmed roughly 4 degrees Fahrenheit since 1900, which means more evaporation and more winter rain instead of snow. But here is the part that changes how you read this entire story. Climate is only responsible for about 9% of the lake's decline. The other 91% is human water use. And here is what makes that number even harder to argue with. Long-term rain and snowfall in the Great Salt Lake Basin has not gone down. The water is still falling from the sky at roughly the same rate it always has. It is just not making it to the lake anymore because people take it first. The drought made a bad situation worse, but it did not create the problem. People did. That shortage has a cause, and it is not drought. A published study found that 62% of the river water that should reach the lake is now pulled out before it ever gets there. 62%, 71% of that goes to farming, and 80% of the farm water grows a single type of crop. Not fruits, not vegetables, not anything that ends up on a grocery store shelf. Cattle feed. Alfalfa and grass hay spread across 1.4 million acres. The Great Salt Lake is not drying up because Utah ran out of water. It is drying up because the water is being used to grow food for cows. City and town water use accounts for another 27%. Outdoor lawn watering alone used 408,500 acre-feet in 2024. That is 97% of all city water use in the state. And across Utah, roughly 200,000 homes sit on flat-fee secondary water systems with no meters. Unlimited water for a fixed monthly price, no usage tracking, no reason to save. I mean, think about that for a second. A state watching its largest lake vanish has 200,000 homes watering lawns with unmetered, unpriced water. NBC. News described it as an all-you-can-eat buffet for water. Mandatory outdoor water meters are now being installed across the state, but the shift has been slow and politically difficult. Utah's relationship with water goes back to the Mormon settlers who built the first irrigation canals in the 1840s. Water rights here are older than the state itself. Asking farmers and homeowners to use less is not just a policy question, it is a cultural one, and the numbers show how far there is to go. In 2024, outdoor lawn watering consumed 408,500 acre-feet. That is almost double what the entire Great Salt Lake Watershed Enhancement Trust has delivered in 3 years combined. Mineral companies take another 6%. Compass Minerals, Cargill, Morton Salt, their solar ponds pull salt, potash, and magnesium chloride from the lake. The industry brings in $1.3 billion a year for Utah's economy. A 2024 law gave the state the power to cut back mining permits in an emergency. The state also purchased the bankrupt U.S. magnesium plant for $30 million. That deal came with 144,000 acre-feet of water rights. Joel Ferry, the director of the Department of Natural Resources, called it the single largest water deal in state history. Add it all up, and the lake's water budget is roughly 800,000 acre-feet per year, short of what it needs. That number, 800,000 acre-feet, is the one that matters most in this entire story. because Utah has responded with more money and more laws than any state has ever thrown at a dying lake. And the math still does not come close. The state and federal government have put in $100 million through matched grants. Governor Spencer Cox signed the Great Salt Lake 2034 Charter, which tied recovery directly to the Winter Olympics. A group of donors called GSL Rising, led by Josh Romney, has pledged $200 million in private money. Ducks Unlimited committed $100 million. The Great Salt Lake Watershed Enhancement Trust, run together by the National Audubon Society and the Nature Conservancy, has steadily grown its water deliveries from 64,000 acre-feet in 2023 to 72,500 in 2025. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints made the largest permanent water donation in state history. Rio Tinto Kennecott, the copper mining company south of Salt Lake City, contributed multi-year water rights. A documentary called The Lake premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in January 2026, putting the crisis in front of a global audience. All of that stands for real, historic action, and it covers roughly 2% of the water the lake needs. Ben Abbott of Brigham Young University figured out that number, 2%. Jake Dreyfus, managing director of Grow the Flow, was blunt about what it means. The progress seen this session still does not put the state on track to meet the governor's promise to return the lake to healthy levels by 2034. The strike team's own models give Utah a 47% chance of reaching the minimum healthy level of 4,198 feet by the Olympics. That is, with 800,000 extra acre-feet per year held up over decades. Current deliveries are a fraction of that. State officials have quietly started adjusting their targets. Brian Steed, the Great Salt Lake Commissioner, has said that reaching 4,195 feet by 2034, 3 feet short of the healthy minimum, would also be an accomplishment. When the person in charge of saving the lake starts redefining what success looks like, that tells you something about where things stand. And the Olympics connection goes beyond looks. A 2013 study found that lake effect snow from the Great Salt Lake adds up to 10% of the yearly snowfall in the Wasatch Range, where Olympic skiing and snowboarding events will take place. A shrinking lake means less lake effect snow and possibly worse conditions at the venues that earned Salt Lake City its greatest snow on earth reputation. Air quality is another concern. The Wasatch Front already has some of the worst winter air in the country because of temperature inversions that trap pollution against the mountains. Airborne dust from the exposed lakebed makes that problem worse. In February 2026, the crisis even reached the White House. President Trump posted, "Make the lake great again" on social media after meeting with Governor Cox. Cox reportedly asked for $1 billion in federal funding. Trump did not push back. Utah lawmakers have said at least $1 billion will be needed, and that federal help is not optional. Estimates from outside groups put the full cost of rescue between $2 and $5 billion over the next decade. Josh Romney has said the final number could be 5 times the current $200 million pledged. The comparison that researchers have been making for years is the Aral Sea in Central Asia, and it is not casual. David Bedford's landmark 2009 paper was titled "The Great Salt Lake, America's Aral Sea?" The Salt Lake Tribune sent a reporter to Kazakhstan in 2024 for a direct comparison. The two lakes share the same cause of decline: farm irrigation draining a lake with no outlet. Salt levels spiked and wiped out water life in both. Toxic dust storms blow off the exposed lake beds of each, and human-built barriers divided them. The Aral Sea by its own shrinkage, the Great Salt Lake by a railroad wall built in 1959. The key difference is that the Aral Sea's collapse was faster, more extreme, and cannot be undone. Its south arm is basically gone. The communities that once fished its shores now live in a dust bowl. Cancer rates and breathing problems in the Aral region climbed for decades after the lake dried up, and the dust carried pesticides from old cotton fields into the lungs of children hundreds of miles downwind. That is the path Utah is on if the Great Salt Lake keeps shrinking, except Utah's exposed lakebed carries arsenic and heavy metals instead of pesticides, and 2.6 million people live closer to it than most Aral communities ever did. Unlike the Aral Sea, the Great Salt Lake still gets a steady flow of water and has not crossed the point of no return. And Utah has the money and the systems to act. Bonnie Baxter has noted that people in Utah do not have to accept a smaller lake the way people in Kazakhstan accepted the Aral Sea. The question is whether they will choose not to. Josh Romney spelled out the 2 possible endings at the GSL Rising opening meeting. By the time the Olympic Games begin in 2034, there are 2 possibilities. The story is either going to be This is the first saltwater lake in modern history that has been brought back. Or, look at this desert landscape. Look at the ecological disaster. No saltwater lake anywhere in the world has ever been brought back. The Great Salt Lake would be the first. And right now, it sits at 4,192 feet, 3.8 feet from its all-time low, with 1,100 square miles of arsenic-laced lakebed blowing into the lungs of 2.6 million people, and the worst snowpack in state history melting 3 weeks ahead of schedule. Kevin Perry, who knows the exposed lakebed better than anyone alive, has said the same thing in every interview for 3 years. The entire state has an unhealthy relationship with water. We need to start living like we live in the desert. 8 years from now, the world will be watching. The question is what they will see.